Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations. I'm so honored that you are circling up with me today. I'm Linda Joy, host of the show, and I'll tell you, I'm passionate about bringing you conversations that can inspire, empower, and support you on your personal and spiritual development path. Today we're going to be talking about astrology, and come on, we've all read the horoscopes, right? We probably all know that we can use astrology in our personal and professional life. But did you know that as an entrepreneur, coach, or author, you can also use astrology as a powerful tool to help you with your business and branding? As today's guest, Vanessa Couto, shares, imagine the sun as the CEO of your business and the moon as the head of your client relations. When I first read that, I was like, yes, I got to get her on the show. So joining me today is Vanessa Couto, an archetypal astrologer, artist, and teacher. She's your wise midwife and a big picture maven. Her passion is to help you align your soul's purpose with the right livelihood through your business. Weaving archetypal astrology, storytelling, and depth psychology, she helps you see the big picture of how your soul's purpose and business are intertwined, beckoning you to express all spokes of your life's wheel. She believes that astrology is a potent compass, not just for your life, but also for your business and branding. She's also the creator of the coloring book, which I love the name, The Astrology of Joy, The Sun's Heroic Journey, and the voice behind the podcast, Intersection Stories, Purpose and Livelihood, which is available on iTunes, by the way. She also runs a boutique graphic design agency, Otterburn & Company, with her husband, helping entrepreneurs up-level their branding. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Linda. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, I told you with that quote that I shared at the beginning, imagine the sun as the CEO of your business and the moon as the head of your client relations. That really spoke to me, and it really led me to reach out to you to learn more. And when I saw what you were up to, I'm like, oh, yeah, baby, got to get her on the show, and let's and talk about this, because I love numerology and astrology and use it in my business. I don't have the in-depth knowledge that you do, but it's this intuitive guidance system where I know I want to align with the universal energies. So let's dive right in, because let's talk about how astrology can be a potent compass for business and branding, and how.
Well, I think I see it really all started with me. I've been involved, I feel like, with astrology forever, learning and studying it. So it's been like 20 years that I've been, with my nose in the books and studying and working with clients. And it really started with me kind of looking at, so how could this help me when I was starting to make my website? How could I be more me when it came to branding? And I started looking at the chart with this sort of the eye of, well, if this is a compass for life, if it's a roadmap for life, how could I apply this to a business? And it's especially true when, if you think about business as something that you birth, that you create, it's your brainchild. So it should have your DNA in it. And especially in the field of, when you are the face of the business, it's really potent. But even if you're just creating a product, or you have a business that isn't, with your face on it, it's still a major guidance tool, because I like to call it your whole chart is your marketing team. So the sun, which much like in your own life, is the thing that you are, but you're also becoming more fully that sun. And all the other planets are helping the sun become more fully itself, I started looking at how can that help my business. So the sun becomes the DNA of the business, the thing I'm birthing. So it really helps you define your key messages. If you were to give a TED Talk tomorrow, what would be the topic? The sun illuminates that. And much like the moon, in your own personal life, illuminates how you address your needs, your soul needs of nurturing and nourishment, and how you relate to others in terms of needs, or like what do you need from a relationship. I could see that the moon, and also in mundane astrology, when you look at events or country charts, the moon reflects the people. And so the moon, if you look from a business perspective, the moon is your client. It's also your team, the team that works with you, so your employees, when you have employees. But so it is that feeling tone. What are the needs that are addressed? And especially if you're looking at like, oh, these are the needs I have, this is the journey I did, then you're kind of really attuned to what your client avatar needs. And so the moon becomes that client relationship. What are the needs that are being fulfilled and nourished?
What a fun way to look at it. But I can also feel the power in this new way of looking at it. Kind of sets the energetic and spiritual container for our rebranding. Yes.
And also, of course, you can have the chart of the business. So let's say when you've registered your business, or when perhaps you've launched the website and you said, hey, people, I'm here. That moment, that birth, of when the business becomes, if you will, official, that creates a chart for the business. So then you can look at the chart of the business, because the business is a soul. It has its own entity. It has its own personality. So then you can look at your chart and the chart of the business and see how you relate. It's a relationship. Sometimes I feel that we have to go to couples counseling with our business, see what's being triggered, what the business wants from us and needs from us. So you can look at that as well.
So true. Now, what if because Aspire magazine is now 13 years old this coming month, so it's 13 years from the first issue, but would you call the birth date from the first issue that went out, or from when the seed was planted that summer that I began taking forward action?
That's a good question. I've had clients have that sort of a similar, issue as well. I think this is where, I talk to the clients, see how they really feel when it was really birthed.
I would say, great question, because I would say it was when I released it to the world, because it came through the birth canal and was out.
Yeah, so then you take that date.
Okay, that's good to know.
And you follow that. So it's interesting because you said 13 years?
Yes.
So then you can also track, much like you would track a child and teenager, the development, right? You can look at how many years the business has been, around, and you can track what is the main theme that's coming up. So 13 going on 14. In astrology, that would be, if you think about a teenager, right, 13, 14, when they start to get rebellious, when they want to stand out for themselves, right? So even the business itself goes through those developmental stages. So often the first 6 years of a business, you're really still working on your identity. You're working on who you are, how you're standing, you're doing all that work. But 13, 14 years, it's like a full moon phase. You're on the other side, so there's a lot of reflection. There's also a calling to be like, okay, I got this far, let's celebrate this. But then starting to think, what might I release? What might I change?
So it's so funny. I love this conversation. I am actually, so I have Aspire magazine, which is 13 years. I have my book publishing company, the radio show. I have 5 media brands. But I'm going through what you just described. It's looking at everything with a new lens of, does this still bring me joy? Now, Aspire Magazine is my baby. She brings me joy. But maybe there's other aspects of the different businesses I have that I'm actually doing what you said. I'm reflecting. Does this still bring me joy? Just because I've always done it doesn't mean I want to continue doing it. And that is exactly what I've been doing. So her February 1st is the start of her 13th year. So I'm in that reflection stage, and it's such a beautiful, expansive energy to be in because it's coming from conscious choice, and it's been so fun and liberating. So it's so funny that it ties into where you said the stage is right now.
Yeah, and I think it's really helpful when you know these things, that when something comes up, you don't feel so like, oh, am I losing my mind, or is it, when you start having, let's say you're reflecting on what you would like to change or not change, you start feeling like, oh, you are aware of a stage. So it becomes more of a conversation with the archetype of the business, the energy of the business, rather than you feeling powerless, thinking that things are coming at you.
Exactly, and that's exactly how I look at it, because I use a lot of spiritual tools like you, astrology and numerology, and just my intuition. So I love that guidance of having a conversation with the soul of your business.
Yeah, and then I know that some people go even further. They communicate with the diva, what do you call it? I think that not the diva, but the spirit of the business, right? And in my own practice, in my own way, I like to also do shamanic journey. So I have, if you will, met the soul of my business. It has a name, and, we have Monday morning meetings,
I love that, though. That is so powerful, because I think it keeps us connected to our mission and the truth, because missions change over time, right? I'm not who I was spiritually, emotionally 13 years ago. So I want my business, because to me my business is my soul project to the world, right? I always want my business to capture my truth and essence. I didn't do my business to start a business. I followed a soul calling that became a business. And I'm talking to more and more entrepreneurs who that's what happened. They never made a head decision of, I'm going to launch a business. They just followed their joy, their passion, their creativity, and it became one. And we're going to take our first break, Vanessa. When we come back, I want to talk about lunar phases and how knowing about them helps us navigate the ebb and flow of life and business, because life is about ebbs and flows, isn't it? And we'll be back in a moment with Vanessa Couto of vanessacouto.com.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Hey, America, we need to have a little talk. We've got more food than we know what to do with in this country, yet 17 million kids in America are struggling with hunger. Makes no sense. Luckily, the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks has volunteers gathering excess food and getting it to hungry kids. They're kind of like food angels. Hey, become a food angel yourself by supporting Feeding America in your local food bank at feedingamerica.org. We can't do it without your help. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM Radio Network.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. With me today is Vanessa Couto, and we're talking about how the sun can act as a CEO of your business, and the moon is the head of your client relations. We're talking about lunar phases, understanding the different phases that your business goes through. And let's talk about those lunar phases. How do you use them to help you navigate the ebb and flow of life and business, Vanessa?
Well, it all really started with my sense that I wanted to feel astrology to be a bit more embodied, because it can kind of get really heady. You know, you look as if you're looking up and you're thinking it's all out there. And when I really started looking at the lunar phases and just looking at the sky, you know, trying to see the moon, see the changes, tracking the moon as the moon goes through the signs, I really felt a connection with the moon being a storyteller. And the more I looked at what phase the moon is in and how I was feeling, it also gave me permission to rest or to keep going. So that sense of when the moon is waxing and the moon is growing, there's that sense of going. And then there's a phase of the moon when she's waning that you feel like, I need to nap, I need to rest. And it kind of allowed me to connect my rhythm with the moon. So it's been a journey of self-awareness in looking at that. Also, the lunar phases, which are 8, it's also representative of not just the relationship of the sun and moon, which is the primary one, and I invite people to start there. You know, because a lot of people don't know yet, have their charts. They just, you know, they know their sun sign. And I invite them to learn, get a calendar or an app and track the moon and see how they feel. Because it's really personal, right? It's like you have to create that relationship and see how you feel as the moon goes through the phases. But those phases are also representative of how we do projects or how the other planets also relate to each other. So one of the things I do, for an example, in my classes or when I give a talk, I sort of divide that workshop or class following the phases. So there's a waxing phase of where we're, you know, pumping it up, going forward. We get to the full moon, there's a reflection, then we start, you know, winding it down, much like the moon. So even the way I structure the framework of a workshop or a class, I follow the phases because it's a process. And if you learn the phases, you really get to see how that plays out in everything, that you can just use that. It's like a beginning, middle, and end.
I love that. I love that you actually bring it that deep right into the structure of your workshops. It just resonates with me, and I never thought of doing that. I know I just follow my own intuitive rhythm, but I like that you have a process, and you help your clients with that also?
Yes, I like to teach them a lot about the moon. I often also bring up the lunar phase that you were born under is also very representative of your sort of the way you engage with the world and what you're here to do. It's really fascinating to know your own lunar phase. And then I invite them to observe how do they feel when that phase is on, right? So if somebody's born under a full moon, let's say, I invite them to see, you know, monthly, how do you feel when there's a full moon? What comes up for you? You know, it's, for me, as a Gemini, everything is about a conversation. So I invite them to, like, what is that conversation like? You know, what is the moon trying to tell them? What do they perceive? I really invite people to look at, let's say the moon is, you know, it could be in any sign. Let's say the moon is in Sagittarius. Just I invite people to observe what's coming up, what kind of conversations that they have, and just sort of observe what's around them. And the more you do that, that connection with the phases becomes really ingrained. And, you know, and then you can see how that plays out in your business. I often tell clients if the moon is disseminating, which is right after the full moon, I say spread the word, get out there, you know, send your outreach emails. You know, it's probably a good day to go through your inbox and reply and share posts, that sort of stuff. It can get really down to the nitty-gritty, and it can get also pretty philosophical.
Yeah, because it's a powerful, it's just like you're aligning with nature.
Yes.
With the flow of nature.
And that phase, all the phases of the moon is also reflected in the seasons, So the sun does the same thing through the seasons, but it plays out through the year. And so I feel like when we follow the moon monthly, we also get a better grip and understanding and connection to the bigger cycle of the sun as the sun goes through its own phases and seasons.
So do you use the moon in your business planning personally? And if so, how do you do it? Do you plan your launches around the moon? If so, what moon cycles are best for what parts of your business? Like example, when we're coming up at the time of our taping, we're coming up on the February new moon. What would your guidance be to an entrepreneur?
So I would take the new moon, which I think a lot of people are becoming very aware of, right? There's a lot going on, a lot of more and more people doing rituals around the new moon. I find the new moon a very potent time to set your intentions, right? Of course, you set your intentions, you do your write-up, but it's also a time when things are still in the dark. So let's say you're going to launch a course, right, or a program. The new moon is when you get down and you sort of think about the intention, the why of what you're doing this. You put it all down. You do your journaling or your writing around that, let's say that course you're creating. Then the crescent moon, which comes right after, is when you start really kind of starting doing the work. You get all the materials and the people and the things you need. You start pulling that in. So it's more active. Then you move into the first quarter moon, and often around that time, something might happen that says, oops, I don't have that resource, or I can't have this, and you have to think on your feet. So this is a time that you could pivot, that you could shift, that you could review what you're doing. It's a good time to reflect on, okay, is this what I want to do, what's missing, how can I be creative if I don't have a certain resource. Then you move into the gibbous moon. It's almost full, and this is a good time to finalize what you're doing, cross the T's, dot the I's, or perhaps do a bit more research. It's a good time for research, digging in deeper in what you're doing. But, the train has left the station, so it's like you can't go back. You're already on that process. And then you get to the full moon, which a lot of people I notice love to release. I see a lot of people saying, full moon, let's release what we no longer. And I'm like, stop. The first thing about the full moon is you have to celebrate and acknowledge what has happened. It's a time of illumination. The moon is bright. You can see, right? So with the full moon, it's a good time to really look at what you're creating, perhaps celebrate and share your gratitude to what has happened, what has worked. But it's also a time when you see what might be not working, what might need to be released. But the full moon is that culmination, right? You want to celebrate. You want to shout from the mountaintop. And then you move to the disseminating moon, which still looks pretty big in the sky, but it's not fully round. And this is a great time, much like the very name is disseminating. You disseminate, you share, you spread. I like to call the disseminating moon the Frank Sinatra moon, because it's like start spreading the news, that song. This is when I like to say do the outreach, share your posts, really go gung-ho on your ads. And then you move into the last quarter moon. It's really a good time during the last quarter moon to sort of have a reflection time to see what's working, what's not working, where might you pivot, where might you start, what are the things you want to sort of get rid of or shift. And then you go into the balsamic moon, the waning crescent. And this is really a good time to release, clean up, see what's not working. This is when you really release. But it's also a time to regroup, to rest, to have that pause. So let's say you launched your course, right? The balsamic moon phase is when you regroup, you acknowledge, you pause, you receive, the sort of like, okay, this is what we did, this is what I've put out into the world. It's also a time with the balsamic moon when you can have sort of like that second wind, when you're like, no, I'm really going to push this to the end. I'm going to give it all, right? It's akin to the action movies when the hero has taken quite a beating and you think, oh, my God, the hero is not going to get up. But they get up and they finish off, right, the fight. So that's a balsamic moon. It has that other aspect as well. But I often invite my clients, and I try to do this myself, to rest a little bit, do something that you feel recharges you. Because all that energy, if you don't rest, you don't have energy to infuse into the seed of the new moon, and then the cycle starts again. So you can kind of see how you can plan it that way. I don't often follow it to a T, but I can tell how sometimes when I'm off, I can look at the moon phase and I'm like, oh, no wonder, I'm trying to do something when it's totally misaligned.
Yeah, like maybe you're trying to push when it's the time of rest. So that's great insights for all of us, that just to stop paying attention. This conversation, my desire is that our listeners who may not have even thought of how to use astrology or lunar phases in their business, at least now have this awareness that they can just start paying deeper attention to how they can use it and tap into their own energies. And we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about soul's purpose. In my introduction, I shared that you help align your soul's purpose with right livelihood. And I would love to get your thoughts on what soul's purpose means to you and how it all ties in. So I'll be back in a moment with Vanessa Couto of vanessacouto.com.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Do you feel overwhelmed and unsure about what steps to take to find peace, joy, and purpose in your life? Chris Groth is a spiritual mentor, energy healer, and best-selling author of the novel Soliloquy, a novel of healing, soul connection, and passion, and co-author of several best-selling books. Chris is passionate about helping women connect more deeply to their own truth, to promote healing, and restore balance to the body, heart, mind, and soul, so they can live a soul-connected life. Chris serves clients around the world through spiritual mentoring sessions, energy healings, and powerful custom-guided sound healing meditations that bring in the energy of crystal singing bowls. If you're ready to heal your heart, nurture your soul, and illuminate your path, schedule a complimentary virtual session with Chris today at chrisgrowth.com. That's Chris with a K and GROTH.com.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hi everyone, this is Shay Parker, the host of Best of the Best, which airs live right here on IOM Radio every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm super excited to bring you expert guest hosts, spiritual discussions, free psychic readings, and so much more. I can promise that you will not want to miss this one-of-a-kind, fun, yet touching, down-to-earth show. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on OTR-FM. This is Shay Parker, and I can't wait to see you there.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, and with me today is Vanessa Couto, and we're talking about how to use astrology in your business, tap in and in your branding, and tap into the lunar phases to help your business grow. So when you use the word soul's purpose, which really resonate with me also in how I live my life, what does that mean to you, Vanessa?
When I was a kid, I used to, and for a long time, I used to think that soul's purpose was, one day I would receive a FedEx envelope, and it would be like, here's your mission, if you so choose, go at it, right? I was waiting for that envelope. And, in my own searches, I realized it's not like that. It's not as simple. And in working with astrology, what I came to realize is that the wheel of the birth chart is your sacred territory, your sacred ground in the cosmic, field. It's like your cosmic real estate. And what I've also noticed in my own life and other people's, we tend to get wonky. We get to focus on one area of our lives because for whatever reason that kind of worked. And we leave other things behind. And then comes a time when you're like, oh, I need to embrace other aspects of myself. So for me, purpose became more, how can I bring in all the spokes of my life's wheel, all of myself, the more fully I can become myself. Not just one part, but everything. And so purpose for me is, in essence, how can I be in the world more fully who I am, who I'm meant to be. It's really a journey of peeling that onion and becoming, it's really about the sun, as I said earlier, becoming more fully itself, and all the planets helping or challenging the sun in that heroic journey. So the purpose might not be as clear as, you're here to save or do this. But I think the more you follow your own intuition of the things that bring you joy, that you feel your natural talent shines, much like the sun, that's the thing. That's the thing when you're, the things you do when you're doing it, time just flies. You're not even aware of that. I think that all relates to the purpose. And then if you think about the business as something you're birthing in the world, it's your brainchild. It has your creative DNA in it. Then it becomes an interesting dance between you and this thing you created, and what is the why of that business? Like, what is it here to do? What is it here to shine, serve? So to me, that also relates to the purpose. But the purpose is to be really you, more fully yourself, and that takes work, I think, because the more you engage with the world, the more you peel it, and you say, "Oh, I have other layers, and I can go deeper." I hope
it's
that
about
makes sense.
letting your authentic self lead the way instead of the masks and labels that you picked up along the way.
Yeah.
That's
and
what it means for me.
Yeah, and we all know how our family or our environment, our culture shapes us, right? And so sometimes there's a lot of peeling off that we have to do before we kind of get to remember who that core is, right? And I have thought a lot about the sun and the sign that the sun is in. And, sun sign astrology, the stuff we read in the newspapers or magazines, can be sort of criticized because it's simplistic to a certain degree. But I'm really fascinated with the idea that if the sun is in a certain sign, then I feel that my purpose is to really be that sign more fully, the depths and layers of that sign, and see how I can be the best Gemini, the best Leo, the best Virgo in the world. Because I feel like the sun didn't go into a different sign. So I feel like I need to really flesh out what are the talents, what are the gifts of that sign. Because if the sun is the center of our solar system, it's also the center of our birth chart. So I do really like to dive deep into the meaning of the sun sign, and that's why I call the sun as the CEO of your business, because that is the core. Everything goes back to that sun. And so it just, in my case, I'm a Gemini. It really invites me to look at all the facets of Gemini, the shadow aspect, the gifts of Gemini, and how can I bring that into the world and express it through my business. Now,
does it, if I understand correctly, if you look at your sign, like I'm a Scorpio, but the magazine was born in February, which I'm off the top of my head, I'm not sure what sign that is. Do I just look at both sides of my personal sign and also the sign of the magazine?
I think I would look at both and see how they can interact and how can they work together. So if your magazine was in February, was it early February?
Yes, February 1st.
So it's Aquarius, right? So think about what you're doing. So your sun in Scorpio wants to illuminate depth. It wants to go deep. It wants to have deep conversations, and that's why you have the program you have. You're bringing in these really deep conversations. But you're doing it in an Aquarius kind of way. You're doing through technology of radio and, web, which is all, it's spreading the news to the public, to a wider public, and it's also bringing in a bigger perspective in deep subjects. So they're going together that way. So you can see how they dance that way.
That's so interesting. I am going to, because I don't know a lot about the sign of Aquarius, so you've piqued my interest that I want to learn more about it, because it relates to the energy of my business, just so I can, tap in.
Yeah, so you have a magazine, you have a radio show. That's all very Aquarius, right? It's like very, it's the media, right? So it's working with that. But you're bringing in that Scorpio energy by saying, we're going to talk about depth. We're going to talk about things that are not surface. They're mysterious subjects. Astrology, it's considered not so much anymore, but some of these sort of occult subjects, if you will, right? Things that are more mysterious, things that require us to look in with more depth, and you're fusing the two together.
That is so interesting. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'll have to dive deeper into this. So, why do you believe there are so many being called into entrepreneurship? And how does that align with what's going on in astrology? Because I see it more often now than I did when I started in 92, when people would say to me, oh, you're leaving your job to become what? Like it was like, what are you, crazy? And now, come on, we all know many entrepreneurs. What do you think is going on, and does it have anything to do with astrology?
I think it does. My sense, on an intuitive level and through some of my own reflections and journeys, is that in the same way that we have souls who want to incarnate as a person, as a human, and have a full life, I feel that businesses are like spirits and souls that want to incarnate, but they want to incarnate as a business, something that is, may not be seen or touched, but affects people. And I think that's one aspect. So things want to be birthed, they want to come. I also think we are going through such transformation in our culture and in our times where people are dissatisfied with the status quo of how things are done in business and government. We can see things are dismantling and changing and sort of dissolving. So I think that kind of invites people to be like, well, what am I here to do if I'm not satisfied with just the job, right? People have a creative spark that they want to share, and I think that also infuses, like, okay, I want to do something in the world that's me, right? That's reflective of who I am. So I think that's another invitation. I think also that astrologically speaking, the planets have their own phases, much like the moon. They engage with each other, and the phases of the moon is reflective of that too, because planets come together, planets separate, and it's like a new seed moment. So, for an example, 2019 is very much for the planets Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter. They're all in what we call a balsamic phase. They're all returning to the union when they come together. And so this year is very much about dismantling, like the balsamic moon, like letting go, retreating, but also regrouping. And then in 2020, they come together. Saturn and Pluto come together, Jupiter and Pluto come together, and then at the end of 2020, Jupiter and Saturn come together. Now, without going way deep into this, all these three big planets, because they take so long to do this dance, the moon does this in a month, but they take years and years. When they come together, it's like a new seed, it's like a new moon. And so they have a civilizational signature. It shifts the zeitgeist, shifts the culture. And we can see it when, just reading the news headlines, things are dismantling, things are coming undone. But at the same time, it's a highly creative time because people get triggered into, maybe not triggered, inspired to create something, to bring something new. So that's why we're hearing so much people saying, "I'm a change maker. I want to provoke change. I want to shift things." You can hear it in the conversation, and then there's a sense that all comes together where we're going towards a shift in civilization, and sort of in our culture, in our zeitgeist. It does reflect, and then also it reflects in the longer cycles because the planets have really long. Some of the slow planets have long cycles, and so you can look at you have to look at the last century and kind of see how it's all unfolding. It's really fascinating. It's confusing as I'm saying now, but it's absolutely fascinating to see the longer cycles and how they shift things.
I just love the whole. I just love how it's all connected to nature, right? We were given these tools as part of the cycle of life, and why not use them? So I've always been drawn to it, so I find this conversation really interesting. We're going to take a final break, Vanessa, and when we come back, I'm all about creativity, which is the feminine, and then, of course, we have to work in the masculine, too, which I think is productivity, tasks, etc. So when we come back, let's talk about how to work with the lunar phases for creative flow and productivity, because like life, it has to be a balance, right, between the two. And I'll be back in a moment with my special guest, Vanessa Couto of vanessacouto.com. Be sure to swing by her website, learn about her services, offerings, and tap into her divine wisdom. I'll be back in a moment.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
The secret to success in life and in business is learning to understand yourself. Because the more you can see what is underneath your reactions empowers you to become a more inspiring and impactful leader. Whether you're looking to develop into a more effective leader in your business, organization, family, or relationship, Dr. Catherine Hayes can help you develop your inherent leadership potential using the power of the Enneagram. Catherine is a dual-certified professional leadership and life coach, Enneagram facilitator, speaker, a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, and the author of the best-selling book, Everything is Going to Be Okay, From the Projects to Harvard to Freedom. If you're ready to discover how your Enneagram personality type drives your patterns of behaviors so you can be empowered to live and lead with more confidence and ease, schedule a call with Dr. Catherine today at CatherineHayesCoaching.com.
Me, a cat moving in with a new human. It took a little getting used to. She has these weird games she likes to play, like this giant feather. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. She sticks it in my face. I swat it away. It's almost like she thinks I enjoy it. But seeing how much fun she gets out of it, well, I guess it makes it all worth it. Humans.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
You're listening to Inspired Conversations. Welcome back. This is your host, Linda Joy, and with me today is Vanessa Couto, and we are talking about astrology and lunar phases, how to use the power of these tools in your business and in your branding. So, Vanessa, right before the break I mentioned about creative flow, which is the feminine, and then productivity, tasks, in our business, which is masculine energy. How can we work with the lunar phases for each of them so that we're honoring both the masculine and the feminine?
That's great. The lunar phases come from the relationship of the moon and sun, right? So it is about that sacred marriage of the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang. And the moon is also like a cosmic storyteller. I sometimes like to call the moon source. She's the cosmic gossip because she, in 1 month, goes through all the signs and talks to all the planets, right? So she's carrying the news. She's carrying the message around. And so what I invite people to do is, first thing, get to see, start with the new moon at least, new and full, because at least most calendars have that. And you can start there and see the new as sort of what are you planting, what's the intention, what's the root that you're digging in. And the full is what are you illuminating, how you're engaging with the outside world, what is coming into vision, right? And the first phase of the moon, the waxing phase when the moon is getting bigger, the waxing phase of the moon is a much more yang, if you will, masculine aspect of that journey because it's going from the inside out. There's a push to go out. The crescent, the first quarter, the gibbous moon up to the full moon, there's the sense that you're working towards putting it out there. The drive is to be out. And so that part of the month you could use to get out there, to do that more sort of yang, taking action, putting it out there in the world. And then you get to the second phase, the second part of that journey, which is the waning phase of the moon, which is when it's about the releasing, it's about coming back home. And so we have the disseminating, the last quarter, and the balsamic moon. These three have a similarity, these three phases in which everything is, yes, you're releasing out into the world, but at the same time, you're pulling back the energy inward so that you can infuse the new seed. So that's the ebb and flow, right? The waxing part of the month, you want to be more active and take more action. And then the waning part of the moon, it doesn't mean you're not doing anything, but there's more of a sense of you're sharing and putting out in the world what already has been created. So it's not, normally, traditionally a good time to start something new because the energy is not as potent in terms of like there's no oomph, right? And so it's a good time to kind of go back in. It's more intimate, especially the balsamic moon, right? You're really kind of regrouping. So that's how I kind of like to think of the months, and that you have these two phases. And also for women who are, still have their period and their own cycle, this is really great to notice how it aligns with your own cycle because we know that there's a lot of information out there about how to work with your own menstrual cycle in terms of productivity, which of course is linked to the moon as well. And so you can work with that. And so that's how I see it. Sort of the first part of that journey is the yang, more masculine, if you will, out there. And then the waning is the yin aspect of that journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so during the yin phases is when the creative, is that when we're tap into the creative aspects of our projects, and during the yang is the task, the productivity?
Yeah, I would say that's you're using your creativity more like you're doing it. You're getting, you get your hands dirty, if you will. And then the yin phase, you're still in a creative flow, but it's more like reflective, perhaps more noticing the subtleties of that, whatever creative project you're doing. But also you have to look at, it makes a lot more sense when you know your own birth chart, because then you can track the journey of the moon as it goes. What is it touching in your chart? That becomes a lot more personal, right? So this is where I think for some people, they may, let's say, like it's a waning part of the journey of the moon, and they may like, but I feel so productive. I feel so, it doesn't align with this whole regrouping. But then if you look at the moon, how it's affecting their birth chart, that makes more sense, because it could be engaging with the planet or traveling through a part of your birth chart that says, no, this is a time for you to get going. This is, so you have to also see things as it relates to the birth chart. Then it becomes really much more detailed as like, oh, okay, I see, it's really personal to me. That is where I would say that the difference comes in.
So many intricate layers, right?
Yeah.
But it's just so fascinating to me. And for our listeners, it's start where you are. And you said this a few moments ago, start with the new moon and the full moon. Start learning about what that feels like, because as Vanessa shared, it's in most calendars now. And start there. That's actually what I did, when I started on this journey, is like I was just drawn to it. Like, what's the moon right now, Vanessa? What would you call it? It's right before the new, but there's another word, and I'm missing it.
So right before the new is called the balsamic or the waning crescent, right? So you can see it in the sky, but it's really thin.
But it was so beautiful last night. About 3 a.m. I woke up and I have an octagonal window, and as I walked by it, I was just in awe. It was so bright, and there were two planets that you could not miss. They were just lined up. I must have stood there just staring at the beauty. The sky was so clear. I'm on the East Coast in Massachusetts. And that happens all the time. I go out for every full moon. My honey goes, honey, it's a full moon. You going out? And we live right on the water. And I was there this month. Even though it was freezing cold, I just go sit out there and I tap in and I listen. And for all the cycles.
It's quite a shame that a lot of people, because living in cities perhaps with all the artificial light, we don't have the luxury sometimes to see the moon. But I invite that a basic thing of just looking at the sky, looking at the moon, see what comes for you. It's very individual, this conversation. I think that all the astrology information that's out there is a good start, but I think it is as basic as when you look at the sky, what comes up for you, right? What do you notice? That is a much more potent conversation.
Yeah, it soothes my soul to go out and to just sit there and just be, and just, especially the full, I don't know why, when it's over the pond, and because I'm in the middle of the woods, it glows. There's no artificial light.
Yeah,
and then it ripples off the water. I'm sitting there like with my mouth hanging down, like it's just in such awe.
And a lot of mythologies about the moon is that, I think of it this way. In astrology, we call the sun and moon the luminaries. And luminaries mean the instructors. So we know right then and there that their relationship is teaching us something. And also another view of the moon in astrology is that the moon represents our soul, right? What does our soul need? And the sun is sort of the spirit, right? You can see it that way as well. So I think that's the soulful connection with the moon. And then in mythology, the moon is often the weaver, right? The cosmic weaver of stories, of how things come together. And a lot of the goddesses are reflective of the three main stages of the moon, which is the crescent, the full, and the waning. So the maiden, the queen, the mother, and then the crone. That's all related to the lunar phase. It's all these, stories of goddesses, and we see their art with, in some shape or form, they're reflecting the stages of the moon.
Well, they're resonating with me more so in the last 5 years. I'm 56 now, so last 5 years I'm really drawn to it and do a lot of things around it, and I try to listen. You have so much in-depth knowledge. I'm so blessed that you could join us today, and I invite our listeners to learn more about you and the work that you're doing in the world, and especially your services around using astrology with business and branding. And I want to give you a URL again. It's vanessacouto.com. And she also has a podcast called Intersection Stories, Purpose and Livelihood, which is on iTunes, so be sure to check it out. Vanessa, I want to thank you for being here with me today, sharing your feminine wisdom with my listeners. I'm glad that we got to circle up today.
Thank you so much. No, this was a total pleasure, and thank you. And I hope that, the information I shared is some thread of it. Pick what, resonates with you and follow that thread and go, do your own research and see how, you can navigate this. And so
that's
thank
how
you
I
so
started.
much for the opportunity. Yeah. And just
you're welcome.
What you said earlier, it really resonates. I think with all these conversations we've had now for years and years that the divine feminine is coming back or is here, it's rising. I think that connection that a lot of people are feeling called to notice the moon is part of that. It's that reconnection with the rhythm because our culture has kind of gotten out of rhythm with nature. And so I think connecting with the moon is connecting back to Mother Nature.
Well, everyone, that is your homework assignment, to connect with the moon. Take a few moments to go outside and look up tonight, first thing, and just be, right? And just allow its energy to just tap into its energy. So thank you again, Vanessa, for joining me.
Thank you.
Until next time, choose love, choose joy, choose happiness, my friends. Blessings.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.